Ways About It with your hosts, Wheeling Mayor Glenn Elliott and Vice Mayor Chad Thalman.
All right, you're listening to Your Wheeling, No Two Ways About It, here on the Watchdog, 1600 AM, 98.1 FM. I'm Chad Thalman, Vice Mayor of the City of Wheeling, in the studio with Mayor Glenn Elliott. Mayor, how you doing?
I'm doing okay, Mr. Vice Mayor. Enjoying the weather. Sunny days are always nice, especially this time of year. It's, the view of spring is just around the corner, and we had council last night.
We did. Yesterday, yes, we did have a council meeting, relatively light.
I'm sorry, yesterday, yes.
Relatively light city council agenda. We can briefly talk about, give a recap of what happened. But normally the day after a city council meeting, the newspaper has a story, recapping what happened at the meeting or talking about something that we voted on. Being a relatively light city council agenda, the headline in today's paper is that the Wheeling mayor blasts West Virginia user fee bill. So for those listening, I think people understand the City of Wheeling has a user fee. It's $2 a week for everyone that works in the City of Wheeling. There's roughly a dozen cities in the state of West Virginia that have a user fee. Cities over in Ohio don't have user fees. They do income tax. So Martins Ferry, other cities in Ohio typically have a 1% income tax. In West Virginia, cities can't do an income tax as a percentage, but we can do a user fee. So in Wheeling, it's $2. I believe Huntington and Charleston, it's up to $5 a week. But there is some talk down in Charleston about basically not allowing cities to have user fees going forward. And Mayor, you're upset about this.
You don't say. Well, it's not that I'm upset because I particularly like the user fee as a way to fund government operations. I think there are far more efficient ways that cities could raise revenue if our state legislature gave us the opportunity to do so. Cities in this state are significantly restricted in the way they can raise revenues compared to our peers across the river or in Pennsylvania. And so there's a reason a lot of cities have turned to user fees, because it's a creature of state code. It's really been around since 1970 or so, that a lot of cities over the years have turned to fund projects which there is a perceived use of. So any city project which people do use and benefit from, city service, you can charge user fees for. So a lot of cities have used it for police and fire operations, or for parks and recreation investments, or for infrastructure investments. The advantage of the user fee, I guess, or the one thing that I do like about it is it allocates the burden not only among people who live in Wheeling, but people who work in Wheeling each and every day. You don't have to be a resident to benefit from Wheeling Police and Fire Services if you work here 8 hours every day.
Or the infrastructure.
Or the infrastructure, yes. You ride over the same road. So that's one of the nice things about it, but there are things about it which I don't like. For example, you have to charge everyone the same fee. So whether you're the CEO of a major bank in Wheeling or you're working at making minimum wage somewhere, you pay the same $2 a week. I hate that aspect of the fee, but because it's a fee and not technically a tax under state law, my understanding is it has to work that way. And we've actually tried to see if we could carve out or exempt minimum wage employees or part-time employees, but you can't. And the only reason we turned to a user fee in the first place, we did it, this was after just some history here. Back in 2018, dating back to 2016 when we first got elected, we made a very clear observation that we toured all the police and fire facilities, and we determined that our police headquarters was just absolutely beyond. You couldn't defend it. You cannot defend. It's a 4,500 square foot facility that dates to 1958. It's not in any way suited for 21st century law enforcement. It's not ADA accessible. It doesn't even have a women's restroom. There's really not a lot of workspace. There's no conference room space for any intents purposes. Our officers are really on top of each other when they're in there. It's just not conducive. The evidence closet is very small, so it's not conducive for 21st law enforcement. So we said we have to get new facilities for them. And then we toured all the fire departments as well. And I realized that the fire headquarters, this dates to 1976, is just not completely efficient for what they need today in terms of the different equipment that they have. It's in the basement of a garage. It's not a great facility at all. And also our various fire stations across the city needed some very important updates. Most of them are old, and it's been a long time since they've been significantly rehabbed. And so we what we proposed was a property tax levy, and that was suggested to us as the best way to go. Well, under West Virginia state law, and I think we're the only state in the country that requires a city's requesting a property tax levy have to get 60% of the electorate to vote for it. And 60%, getting 60% of people to vote for anything is difficult. Getting 60% of people to vote for a tax increase is especially difficult. And I thought we gave it a really good sort of PR effort. We had great efforts by both our police and fire chiefs to get the word out. We gave tours of the departments. And then it came to Election Day in 2018 in November, and we got about 54% of the vote in support of that. Any other state that I know of, that's a win. But in West Virginia, because our state legislature does not trust our cities to do these things and makes it extra difficult, that was a failure. That vote failed. So we had no solution to solve the police and fire needs. And so we looked to really the only other option that so many cities across the state have done, which is user fees. And it was highly debated and controversial, and I'm not suggesting that people like it, but it passed council 5-1. One member of council was not there. We had, this was in, I guess, when did we pass it? The end of 2019. It went into effect at the beginning of 2020. And we had a council election, and it was supposed to be in May, but it was in June of 2020. And just
6 months after a tax increase.
6 months after tax increase went, so that's a perfect opportunity for the residents of the city to voice their support or opposition to that fee, because it was very much in the news throughout the entire prior year. And I'm not suggesting this is the only issue in those elections, because every race had its own issue, but of the 5 incumbents who were seeking re-election, the 4 who voted for the user fee won, the 1 who voted against the user fee lost. Now, that to me, it doesn't say that people love the user fee, because I don't think anyone loves the user fee, but it says to me that people made a decision or came to the conclusion that while we may not like the user fee, the reasons why it was implemented in the first place were reasonable and justifiable, and we like the fact that our police and fire are now going to get a new headquarters. That's a reasonable conclusion from it. And I thought at the time that that's the last time we'll be talking about the user fee for a long time, because it kind of folks had just kind of accepted it, and it is what it is, and it's the cost of doing business in the city living. We get it, but we're going to get great police and fire services, and we're going to get a lot of improvements to infrastructure projects.
Which are desperately needed.
Absolutely desperately needed. And then, fast forward to this legislative session down in Charleston, and it's like every year, instead of us thinking, playing offense and thinking of things that cities really could benefit from or use to attract new business and investment, it seems like every year the legislature is in session, we're playing defense. Just trying to protect the few powers that we as cities have in this state. And of course, this year it started out as a bill. The bill was just going to exempt state employees from paying the user fee, which really made no sense to me, but state employees, if they're working in Wheeling, they benefit from the user fee services just the same way as everybody else. But that was the bill. It wasn't going to have a big impact on Wheeling because we don't have a ton of state employees here, but it was going to have a huge impact on Charleston and on Morgantown, where because of state government and because of WU, you have a lot of state employees. I think it was going to cost us $30,000 a year in revenues. It was going to cost them over $1 million each, Morgantown and Charleston. So obviously they had big concerns with it. We had concerns with the bill just because we thought it creates some sort of classification which doesn't really make any sense. Why state employees shouldn't pay the same that everybody else does didn't make any sense to me, but whatever.
State employees were not being exempt from property taxes or income tax or sales tax, just city municipal user fee taxes.
And so that bill went to the House Political Subdivisions Committee, and in the course of its debate, an amendment was offered by Delegate Foster, I believe, to basically wipe out all user fees across the state. And no one gave us advance warning this was coming, except for maybe the day before. Going into the session, like no one said, hey guys, hey cities, we're going to be looking at taking away user fees, so maybe we should look at other ways for you guys to raise revenue. Like that never happened. All that happened is we find out from our folks down at Charleston. Actually, we're going to have, I should say after the break, we're going to have Travis Blosser on. He's the executive director down there for the West Virginia Municipal League. Basically the city's advocacy organization down there. I think there's over 200 cities across the state are members of that organization, and they really lobby for us down there and keep us apprised of what's going on. We found out from them the day before that this is going to happen, and it happened, passed the committee. So basically all user fees, if this bill were to become law, all user fees would effectively be declared moot. And cities like Wheeling, which have plans, we've already started plans for the new police headquarters in the old VPC building on the OVMC campus. We're very close to selecting a location for a new fire department headquarters, and all of a sudden, with this bill, there's talk of pulling the funding source out from under that, right in the middle of all this process. And not to mention the fact that in some cities like Charleston, Parkersburg, and Huntington, at least, I've talked to the mayors there, and they said they will have to lay off police officers if this bill becomes law. Like, this bill would actually, and I hate to use this phrase, but it would actually defund the police in those cities. So that's where we are right now. And whether or not you like or dislike the user fee is one thing, but I think the broader issue here that I want folks to focus on is we have a lot of folks in this legislature who call themselves conservatives, and and conservatism, you believe in limited government, and you believe that local government is the best, governs best, or knows what's best for people within its ambit. Conservatism is supposed to resist a sort of a top-down approach of one-size-fits-all government that you sometimes see at the federal level. And but here, this legislature, we've already seen a bill pass the House that says that cities can't ban straws, even though no one's talked about banning straws. We've heard talk of this legislature outlawing all the non-discrimination ordinances that cities have already approved, including Wheeling. We did that in 2016. And now you're hearing a talk of that same legislature trying to outlaw user fees, which a lot of cities have relied on to fund important investments through their own communities. That's not conservatism. Why does this legislature have such minimal respect for the voters who elected us, and then us who made decisions which we felt were best for our communities?
Yeah, and Mayor, it's my understanding that other states actually help their cities succeed, and our neighboring states do that. Cities in Ohio, cities in Pennsylvania have a lot more flexibility to be able to make their own decisions. The reality is, though, unfortunately, it seems like every year when January, February, March rolls around and our legislature is in session down in Charleston, Mayor, we hold our breath nervously awaiting, what are they going to do that's going to tie our hands behind our back and hurt cities. And that's not the way it should be. I mean, we should be excited when the House and the Senate are in session. We should be excited thinking they're going to help solve some of our problems, but that's not the reality. And I do want to say, and Mayor, you've said this before, I think you said it yesterday at the council meeting, but I do want to point out that the delegates and the senators that we have representing Ohio County, Delegate Sean Fluharty, Delegate Erica Storch, and State Senators Ryan Weld and Bill Ehlingfeld are not part of the problem. No. We have a good relationship with them. It's really the delegates and the senators from the southern part of the state that seem to want to ban straws and tie cities' hands behind their back.
Delegate Fluharty and Storch actually voted against the bill in committee, so I thank them for that vote. And Senator Weld and I have been talking. If this bill makes its way to the Senate, he has strong opposition to it, and we'll do what he can to stop it. But I do think, on that note, we need to take a quick break here, and we'll pick up some topic of the user fee when we bring on Travis Blosser from Charleston here in the second half of the show. But we'll be right back here on The Watchdog.
Tune in to The Watchdog Morning Show with Howard Monroe, weekday mornings, 7 to 10 a.m. on the Valley's favorite live and local talk radio station, The Watchdog.
This is Wheeling Fire Chief Larry Helms, reminding everyone about the seriousness of this COVID-19 in our region during these colder weather months. This virus is spreading rapidly and could put a strain on our hospitals and emergency services. I am asking everyone to please wear a mask. It's important to make sure your mask covers your nose and your mouth at all times. Wearing a mask is one of the only defensive tactics we have to slow this virus down. Remember, wear a mask, stay apart, and wash your hands.
Island Pawnbrokers is now your local firearm dealer. In a pinch? Need cash quick? See us before going to the big box stores. Paying top dollar for firearms, gold, silver, tools, coins, and electronics. Don't lose your good credit. Let us give you instant cash. Stop by 2 North Broadway Street on Wheeling Island, Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. and Saturday, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Island Pawnbrokers. Stop in for instant cash.
Proctor. The Watchdog is protecting your yard. Join Howard Monroe, Hoppy Kercheval, Bill DeFabio, and Big Rick for the best live and local talk in the Upper Ohio Valley and beyond. Proctor trusts the Watchdog.
As we slowly approach spring, ISA certified arborists want those of you with fruit trees to know that most varieties should be pruned in late winter before their buds start to open. But pruning fruit trees is very different than pruning other trees. In fact, some of the techniques are the exact opposite. To find out more about pruning fruit trees for a bountiful harvest, contact an ISA certified arborist near you by going to treesforohio.org. That's trees, the number 4, ohio.org.
The 2021 Honda Pioneer lineup is here to make light work of the job and add a heavy dose of fun to your day off. Every Pioneer side-by-side is stock full of smart technology, responsive power, and Honda's hallmark of engineering excellence. The only thing left to add is you. Then you'll understand how life is better on a Honda. For your safety, read the owner's manual, wear a helmet and eye protection, always wear your seatbelt, and keep the side nets and doors closed. Pioneers are for drivers 16 years and
Wheeling Coin and Hobby on 10th Street in Wheeling, next to the Bridge Tavern in downtown Wheeling, wants to buy any and all unwanted gold and silver jewelry. They are paying top dollar for 10, 14, 18, and 22 karat gold plus 925 sterling silver. They also want to buy collectible coins and paper money from before 1933. Wheeling Coin and Hobby is open daily from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., Monday through Saturday. Coin and Hobby, 304-232-8430, and add them on Facebook.
Text us or call us with questions or comments. Your Wheeling No Two Ways About It continues on The Watchdog.
Always dancing down the street.
All right, we're back listening to Your Wheeling No Two Ways About It here on The Watchdog. Mary, when we went to break, we were talking about the user fee. I don't want our listeners to be confused. When we say the user fee, what we're really talking about is the Elliott tax.
It's the Elliott tax.
I think if we call it the Elliott tax, people understand what we're talking about.
Thank you. Yeah, that's my fear. The more we talk about this issue, the more it links me to a very unpopular tax fee, whatever it is. But this isn't just a tax. Look, you can disagree with the user fee, but if you look at what we're spending it on, I challenge you to say that what we're spending it on is unwise spending or an unwise investment for our community. And if you have a better way to fund it, I'm all ears. We did what we did because we made I did a lot of due diligence, looked at all the options, and made a very painful conclusion that we had to raise revenues to get these things done, or else they weren't going to fit any other overall budget. There's just not a lot of fluff in our budget where we could cut from to fund new facilities for police and fire departments. So, we did what we did. I stand by that decision. If the state wants to give us other options to raise revenues that aren't as inefficient, I guess, as user fee is, I am all ears. And as I said, it was quoted in the paper today, I'm happy to go down to Charleston and sit in any panel discussions on that topic and think of other ways that cities can raise revenues. But you can't just take away a major funding source like this without any other alternatives and expect cities already dealing with all the issues of being in the middle of a pandemic. You can't expect cities just to kind of adjust on the fly to this. There's a lot of real investments here that are at stake. So one other topic, and then, I don't want to make this show all about our legislature, but it just seems like these issues just keep coming up. And one of the things, we talked about, last week's show, we talked a little bit about the governor's plan to phase out the income tax. And, there are pros and cons to that. I have my concerns with it, mostly because of the impact I fear that it could have on the sales tax side of things. For all cities and counties located in border areas, my concern is if you increase the sales tax too high, you're going to really draw retail investment outside of the state. But that's a separate conversation. But the one thing I did want to mention today is, we've worked really hard in prior years to get the legislature to increase the state historic tax credit. In fact, the Wheeling-Pittsburgh Steel Project would not be happening if we weren't able to increase that tax credit from 10% to 25% statewide. If you phase out the state income tax, basically there's no credit for that the value of the state historic tax credit basically goes to zero. Now, it may not be entirely zero for a variety of technical reasons, but basically the value of that state historic tax credit goes away. And so the cost of a project like the Wheeling-Pittsburgh Steel Building goes up relative to what it would be in other cities that have other states that have that state historic tax credit, like Ohio, Pennsylvania, Maryland, Virginia, all of our neighbors. And it would be a disincentive to investing in those historic buildings vis-a-vis investing in states that have the credit. So that's something we have to kind of talk about as well. And, I've reached out to our state delegation on this as well and said, look, while I have my concerns about the income tax phase out, that's one thing. But if you do it, make sure that there's still some value in the state historic tax credit. Otherwise, it's going to be hard to make projects like Wheeling Pit happen. For a city with a lot of historic buildings, that's something that, it always costs more to make those buildings work, but I think the end result is much better than new construction. But if there's no tax credit or no incentive to make that happen, it's not going to work, and we'll end up seeing a lot of buildings continue to sit empty.
And Mayor, maybe we do this at the end of the show, but I want to make sure at some point in time we briefly talk about and give a brief recap of what happened yesterday's council meeting. It's a relatively light agenda, but it looks like we're getting close to the 12:30 break. When we come back from the break, we're going to be joined by Travis Blossner. He's going to be calling in from Charleston. Travis was previously the city manager in Weirton. Currently, he is the director of the West Virginia Municipal League. The Municipal League is a statewide nonprofit association of cities and towns that was established in 1968, and the goal is to assist local governments and advance the interests of citizens who reside within them. So we're going to be joined by Travis after we take the break. Stay tuned in.
The Metro News Update is brought to you by Thomas Auto Centers, Mall Road, St. Clairsville. Get the best deal at Thomas Auto Centers.
West Virginia Metro News, I'm Chris Lawrence. Waters are starting to slowly recede today in West Virginia, revealing some terrible things for many in southwestern West Virginia. Rachel McGinnis and her husband own Appalachian Pest Control in Barbersville. They watched helplessly yesterday as the water of the Mud River rose into their business on U.S. Route 60.
We had lost everything in the building, computers, chemical, and everything. We were able to get some of the chemical and stuff out, but not all of it. We also lost 5 worked vehicles.
In Mingo County, the Tug Fork River has destroyed everything. With the Tug Valley High School football team, Coach Haiti Ford talks about first walking into his team's field house when the water receded.
I had washers and dryers in there, and they were flipped upside down on top of everything else. It was the lockers actually completely. They were wooden, so they raised up and turned over, and again, it tore everything we had up. Shoulder pads in there. I mean, you name it, it was in there.
The water has also covered the football field. Meanwhile, Governor Jim Justice declaring a state of emergency in 18 West Virginia counties due to the flooding. That declaration freeing up the National Guard and cutting the red tape for other state agencies to assist in the recovery. Elsewhere, there are 18 vaccination clinics set for today across West Virginia. All of those to deliver the vaccine by appointment only. Those can be arranged at vaccinate.wv.gov. As of this morning, there were 200,000 West Virginians fully vaccinated. You're listening to Metro News, the voice of West Virginia. 2 Putnam County women are identified as the victims of a Tuesday morning wreck on Route 35 near the Putnam-Mason County line. Dead are 59-year-old Sandra Rice and 54-year-old Laurie Hall, both from Hurricane. They were killed when their vehicle hit black ice, skidded sideways, and then hit another vehicle that had already gone into the ditch near the Mason-Putnam County line. In Kanawha County, in the community of Pinch, the Little General gas station on Indian Creek has a gaping hole in the side. Vehicle crashed into it last night. Nobody hurt. From the Metro News Anchor Desk, I'm Chris Lawrence.
Does your dog need groomed or walked? Are you looking for a pet sitter or dog boarding options? If so, call Dirty Paws, Wheeling's newest pet care service, providing the Ohio Valley with everyone's pet care needs. Check us out on Facebook at Dirty Paws WHG or call 304-639-7754.
Oh, there's something so real about living local, and I know without a doubt I'm not alone. And I love living local. There's nowhere else I'd rather be. Said I love living local. WTRF is working for me. The Ohio Valley is where I love to be.
Quaker Steak and Lube at the Highlands is the perfect place to relax after a long day. Happy hour from 3 to 6 Monday through Friday. Get $2 off appetizers, $3 off domestic drafts, and house wine specials. Quaker Steak and Lube, voted Best Wings USA. Quaker Steak and Lube at the Highlands with another steal of a deal. Get a steak burger and fries all day Monday for only $8.99. It's also Military Mondays. The Lube will take 25% off for all veterans, active duty military, and first responders. Quaker Steak and Lube, voted Best Wings USA.
Hey man, what can I get you?
Yeah, can I have 2 Coors Lights?
You got it. Hey Mike! I need 2 Coors Lights!
With a taste as cold as the Rockies,
Only Coors Light gives you refreshment every time. Here you go.
Thanks, Mike. Doing a great job. All right, 2 ice-cold Coors Lights.
That's the coldest beer I've ever had.
Hey, they don't call it the world's most refreshing beer for nothing.
Okay, be honest with me. Do you really have the Rocky Mountains in your beer cooler?
You don't believe it? Check it out.
Man, that's pretty amazing.
I know, right? I can't believe it myself sometimes. I mean, this cooler is only 3 feet wide.
Coors Light, the world's most refreshing beer. Coors Brewing Company, Golden, Colorado. With great beer comes great responsibility.
Washington County's largest gun show is back on Saturday and Sunday, April 10th and 11th from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. at the Washington County Fairgrounds. Admission is just $7, and kids under 12 get in free with an adult. Everyone is welcome. They offer free appraisals and have great prices on all types of firearms, modern, military, and antique. They have over 450 tables with cash buyers on site for your used guns. Visit arhsportshop.com or call 724-948-3571 for more information. That's 724-948-3571 for more information. That's Washington County Gun Show, presented by ARH Sports Shop, April 10th and 11th.
Listen to the Bill DeFabio Variety Show with Bill DeFabio and Lola Miller. Weekdays noon to 2 on the Valley's only network dedicated to live and local talk radio, The Watchdog.
Text us or call us with questions or comments. Your Wheeling No Two Ways About It continues on The Watchdog.
Alrighty, welcome back, everybody. Mayor Glenn Elliott in the house with Vice Mayor Chad Thalman on this week's edition of Your Wheeling No Two Ways About It. And unlike most weeks, we are talking a lot of state issues today because a lot of things that our legislature is doing could have a pretty big impact here in the city of Wheeling, and not to mention other cities throughout the state. So we have a little bit of a legislative focus today. Normally we'll get back to city affairs, because trust us, we much prefer talking about city business and state business any chance we get. But this is not a usual time here, and we're on defense this legislative session as we have been. As we have a very special guest joining us right now from Charleston, Travis Blosser. Travis is the executive director of the West Virginia Municipal League. And as the Vice Mayor said before the break, they're basically the city's advocates. All the cities across the states advocate in Charleston. Each year they really keep us apprised of what's going on and advocate for city's interests across the state. Travis, are you there?
I'm here, Mayor.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us today. We're glad you could fit some time today. But I know that during the legislative session you're an especially busy man. But before we get talking about all the fun and great things our legislature is doing, I thought we'd just talk a little bit about your background. You have a pretty unique perspective on cities because you've both served as a member of a city council and as a city manager. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got into where you are right now?
I had the opportunity to serve on Fairmont City Council, and then subsequently to that was a city manager in a small community in Shinnston, West Virginia, just down from Fairmont, and then eventually got my opportunity to be the city manager in the city of Weirton, up your way, for a little about 3 years. It's given me a unique perspective, both sitting as an elected official, making decisions, and then also as an administrative official appointed by those local elected officials to make decisions as well. So it gives that two viewpoint side of that. So yeah, I've been around the block a little bit, and then now, of course, down here with the West Virginia Municipal League for the last we're headed into, I think, the third year now down here.
Hey. Travis, the Chad here. Thanks for calling in. Now, city councilmen and city managers, I think usually, their goals are usually aligned. Obviously, they want to serve the citizens, but you probably have a really unique perspective, being, as you mentioned, being both a city manager and an elected official. The elected officials ultimately work for the voters. The city manager ultimately works for the elected officials. So what was it like to step out of the shoes of a city councilman in Fairmont and then become a city manager?
It was, at first it was a little bit different. As a city council member, certainly as you know, Vice Mayor, you receive the complaints. But I think when you're sitting as a city manager, you not only receive the resident complaints, but you're receiving the same complaints from those elected officials that are sharing that with you about, and sometimes it's as minute. One moment it's a conversation about, I try to use this term as somebody's dog was pooping in their neighbor's yard, and so they have an issue with it, and then you move on to talking about, $100 million economic development project, and that can be your day as a city manager, and sometimes as a council member, you aren't hearing all of those specific things all at one time, but that was kind of, I think the perspective that I saw was that, as a city council member, sometimes it's a little more insular for me because I'm not handling all the staff components, all of the staff issues that have to be dealt with on a daily basis. But then you add those in on top of all of the other issues you have to take care of. It definitely gave me a perspective to see that as a council member, by no means in Fairmont we had a city manager. By no means did I understand the daily amount of things that he or she in that capacity had to deal with. So,
yeah, it's got to be perfect training for the position you're in now, because of course you're dealing and representing cities from across states, talking regularly not only to elected officials but also to city managers across the state. And at the municipal league, you guys do a great job, but it just seems like every year we're playing defense, and maybe this year it seems worse than others. But what can you tell us? First of all, what can you tell us about the role of the league down there? And how you see your role and advocating for cities. But then, what can you tell us about to explain sort of the perspective that this current legislature sees to hold cities in somewhat skepticism, or just doesn't trust cities? What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I wish I could completely put my head around it, for some of it. But specifically, on the league side, I mean, we, as you've mentioned in the introduction, I mean, we are, not just a local government advocate, but that includes the residents, businesses, and folks that reside in those communities and are traversing in those communities, travelers. We essentially see our role as the advocate for those local governments, and I feel like it's easy for me and some discussions with some of these folks is that, there's been a push, and quite frankly, in my opinion, it's been bipartisan over the last so many years of, pushing local control, and that more control needs to be felt locally, that the best folks that can govern are the people closest to them. And so, policies being set, and I hate to say Charleston because that's offensive to the city of Charleston down here, but the state capitol complex, to have all those issues down here being taken care of rather than the issues going on in Wheeling, it perplexes me that someone would think they understand all of those issues. And I honestly think that there's been, a lag in, I think, people understanding all of the dynamics here. But there has definitely been a large push, especially this year, to roll back local control and decision-making, which is problematic. When that happens, cities right now in West Virginia, for the large part, are sitting on $1.1 billion in unfunded pension liability for police and firefighters. That's something that our communities have been managing, and those pension funds are moving into better shape than they ever have been for the last probably 10 years now. And that's in large part due to, fiscal management being done by cities across the state of varying sizes. And it's because they've been empowered to make those decisions through home rule or other kinds of initiatives that have allowed them some more flexibility to make decisions locally that work best for them. So, I wish I could wrap my head around the dynamics of why folks are viewing cities in such skepticism, whether it's preemption measures for banning plastic bags and plastic straws, something that, I've not seen municipalities in West Virginia moving forward with. When I talk to mayors like yourself and the vice mayor, you guys you guys are dealing with economic development projects, figuring out how you can bring a $30 million development into downtown, do additional streetscape projects to encourage additional development. And that's happening all over the state. That's what our folks are more concerned about. They're not looking at, well, we need to ban these plastic straws or plastic bags. And quite frankly, the private sector is moving forward with that. It's a global trend, not even just a national trend, that corporate companies are making corporate decisions to take those items on. I don't necessarily know that local governments in West Virginia have to take those initiatives, that they have business communities that are pushing forward with those kinds of reforms because they understand that's something that the world is moving towards. So I wish I could understand in some of these folks' minds, but it just why they view cities in skepticism. But it's hard in my side to view it to understand their view when I just think it completely contradicts the focus of giving local control and giving control locally for decisions to be made where they're best made at. If we simply resign ourselves to waiting for the legislature to make decisions, they meet 60 days out of a year. That's complicated. City councils, you all, and mayors, you all are responsible for making decisions every day. And that's why you all need to have the flexibility to make those decisions.
I know the league doesn't really get into left-right partisanship or whatever, and it's a nonpartisan organization, but it seems to me that there's a lot of folks in the legislature now who, if you polled them, are you a conservative? I think a vast supermajority would say, yes, I am. And a conservative governance as a philosophy basically does sort of put say that local decisions are best made by the local government closest to it, the people being represented. Like it rejects a one-size-fits-all top-down approach, and yet that is exactly what they're doing. You mentioned the bill which passed the House, which would ban cities from banning straws and other plastic products. I can tell you that we've never talked about banning straws in the city of Wheeling. I don't think any city in the state has, but if we wanted to ban straws, and we felt that was the best thing for Wheeling, why should the legislature be telling us not to? There are consequences for cities that make poor decisions. People move out of them and people want to elect the elected officials who are there. Let us make that decision. If we're wrong, then whatever. And just so everyone listening, I'm not proposing banning straws because we're not going to ban straws. But I mean, what is the fear that a city may do something? I think really what a lot of these folks are responding to, they watch cable news, they see some city out in the state of Washington or the state of California that does something which is considered to be sort of a far left move, and they say, oh my God, we don't want our cities to do this here in West Virginia, so we're just going to stop before they even think about it. And that is not that's not leading. That's not taking our state to a place where it needs to be to compete in the 21st century. That's still fighting the battles of the last century. We got to get past this, and I really feel for you because you're right there on the front lines, having these conversations each and every day. I know you would much rather be talking about ways to stimulate investments in cities instead of defending the user fee.
Yep.
But that's exactly where you are right now, and I feel for you there. But I do appreciate your advocacy because without you guys down there, we have our members up here, and I have to say, as the vice mayor said in the prior segment, our 4 representatives from up here, our 2 delegates and our 2 senators, are not part of the problem in this regard. Like, they're not trying to take away cities' rights to control themselves, but we have a lot of other members from other portions of the state that just seem hell-bent on saying no to cities, on saying that cities are somehow the enemy or can't be trusted to manage their own business, and it's just frustrating.
Yeah, and Mayor, I think, from our perspective, and personally from my side, I mean, again, we are a nonpartisan organization, but I view myself as a fiscal conservative, and even in my roles as a council member as well as a city manager, and it is not conservative philosophy to bring control back under a centralized system. The conservative philosophy is that the government that governs best is closest to the people, and that is not at the state capitol. That is in these local communities that are talking to community members every day. And I think you even said it best. If Wheeling wanted to ban plastic straws, which again I want to preface that you're saying you're not doing that or talking about it, but if you were, you have an election, and your voters would make a decision of whether or not they are happy with the decisions that you and your fellow elected officials would make. And I can't, if we're going to do away with, I know, Mayor Williams from Huntington says it best. If this is the direction that the legislature wants to head, then they just need to take the keys, and we need to provide the keys to City Hall and allow them to run it. Hand them the $1.1 billion in unfunded pension liabilities. Hand them the infrastructure that needs to be replaced. The additional police and fire that they would have to have underneath of their control, and see how well they're able to manage that, and whether or not residents believe that that's the direction that things should go. And I based on what we are seeing in our local communities, I don't think that's the case. I don't think that's what voters elected this legislature to do. As you shared, you have two senators up there from different political parties, but both strong advocates of local control. Senator Weld was the lead sponsor of home rule legislation that made that program permanent, and has been an effective advocate in that role. That, we have folks that I think understand clearly that this is not what they were elected to do in Charleston. They were not elected to make state government bigger and bring under its domain more and more control. That was not what they were elected to the legislature for.
Travis, from my perspective, and this is just my opinion, I almost view some of these delegates in the southern part of the state as having the attitude that the voters got it right when they elected them to the House of Delegates, but these same voters can't be trusted to get it right when they elect people to local city councils, local county commissions. That's kind of the way I view this. I mean, none of us like higher taxes. None of us like the user fee. I work in Wheeling. I pay the $2 a week user fee, or as we call it now, Travis, the Elliott fee. But, I don't like paying it, but what I dislike even more was voting for it. Voting for it and forcing, 15,000 employees in the city of Wheeling to pay it was probably the most unpleasant vote I've ever taken as an elected official. But ultimately, I felt like that was necessary. And I know it was necessary because I toured the police and fire headquarters. I see the condition of our infrastructure, and I realize that we need to make investments in these things. Some delegate down in the southern part of the state that has probably never been to Wheeling is not in the same position to make that judgment call.
Yeah, no, and I would agree with that. And I think our message consistently here recently has been that, and even prior to the session, this has been our messaging for years, but is that we are committed to being a partner with the legislature, and we're also committed. And I know Mayor Elliott sits on our board of directors for the organization, and is also part of the working group that our board has, that our president has formalized this year prior to the start of this session, to look at common sense tax reform initiatives for local governments to provide. At the end of the day, people want services. They have to understand that those cost funds, but from a city perspective, I don't think any of us, as you just articulated with the user fee, and none of us are against, and none of us, especially in local government, are sticking our head in the sand and thinking we don't want anything to change. We all want change and growth and people to move to our communities, to raise their families, and to have an opportunity to experience West Virginia. We want that. We want folks who have left to come back. But the only way to do that is they're not going to come back when the bridge is falling down, when the sidewalks are crumbling, when there's police officers being laid off, when you can't put police and fire personnel in an adequate facility so that they can provide the services that they need to residents. That's not effective. When your police officers and your fire department, specifically talking about Wheeling, probably aren't having the best, maybe sometimes the best viewpoint of their job because of the crappy facility they have to sit in, and the fact that they don't feel as if the community is invested in them if that doesn't happen. And that's not the case, but the legislature wants to strangle your hands on that. But we are firmly behind being a partner with the legislature and finding common sense tax reform and benefits for all residents, regardless of if they live in a corporate boundary or outside of it. And we want that. We want to be a partner. But what's going on right now in some of this legislation, the user fee, the bill just introduced today that would strip the sales tax provisions from home rule, the ability for communities to implement that, which has dramatically funded pension funds, specifically Wheeling. Your pension fund, a ratio from 2015 police was funded at 37%, fire at 29%. Now your police department as of 2019 was at 50% funded, and your fire department at 41%. The dramatic increases you all have been able to put towards pension funds to ensure that the pensions that were guaranteed to those police and fire personnel are kept. No one, Republican, Democrat, it's a nonpartisan issue, wants to make sure that those folks get the pensions that they deserve. And that funding is allowing you to do it. And it's allowing you to folks that are traveling in the community, spending money in the community, or helping to pay towards those services. Same with the user fee. And I know I'm preaching to the choir with the two of you, but hopefully the listeners out there are hearing that as well, that we're not opposed to looking at other ways in which we can work to provide the resources necessary to make these services happen, but that's also good for everybody. But I have to admit, taxes are an unpopular thing. Taxes, fees, no one wants to pay them if they don't have to. But services cost money. There is not a blank check that is going to pay for these items. Those don't exist. I know when I was in Weirton, one of the things that I know the community consistently has had to deal with over the years is they were lucky that they had Weirton Steel Corporation that paid for a lot of the things within their community. But that community had to recognize that once Weirton Steel was not what it once was, and you look at the company that's there today, is a fraction, a minimal fraction of what Weirton Steel used to be, it can't provide those things. The community has to pay towards those items, and if you want those services. So, I think from our perspective, we are willing to be partners, and I think your delegation, your folks, Delegate Storch, Senator Ehlenfeld, all of your folks, we feel are right there with us, understand the issues, and we're thankful for them, and we're also thankful for your all's leadership in the city of Wheeling, and the things that you all are doing, and the progressive things you're doing with projects and seeing downtown revitalized again. Who would have thought Wheeling would be seeing 10 years ago a $30 million investment into a building there in downtown to provide living people to move into downtown. There is a shift that direction in these communities, and if we want to take advantage of folks who may not want to live in New York City, may not want to live in Pittsburgh even, for those folks to move down here, but those folks are still going to want the same kinds of services that they were being provided in those large metropolitan communities. And those services cost money.
Travis, you definitely are preaching to the choir, but I hope folks are listening because, one of the things that I think is surrounding a lot of the initiatives is, yes, there's an anti-tax component, but there's also the sense, and I'd also bring the governor's a proposal to phase out the income tax into this, is there's a sense that people choose where they want to live and work based on whatever the tax base or the tax system is in that community. And maybe people who are, in their 50s and 60s and thinking about retirement do kind of shop where they live based on tax issues. But for folks just out of college, young professionals, I can tell you from experience, and I can tell you from the people I talk to, they're looking to live where things are that meet their expectations, where the quality of life is good, where they can live with low cost of living, but still have things like loft apartments, microbreweries, Uber, all the different things, a good parks and rec system, safety. That's how they're picking where to live. They're not looking at the state income tax and saying, I'm going to move to West Virginia because of the state income tax. I think that's the little bit of the misguided philosophy right now is we're trying to bring people in, but we're not letting cities make investments that they need to make. One of the things we've been fighting with here for many, many years is to get our streetscape project funded because it's a state street which runs right through our heart of our downtown. The condition of those roads is abysmal, and it's been the reflection of the city for many, many years. We're very thankful that we got that project funded and it's starting this year. But we need more investments like that to make Wheeling look and feel a lot better if we're going to actually attract people to come here. But folks are talking, banning a city's user fee is not going to bring people from outside into Wheeling if you can't meet their expectations for when they get here. And I think that's what's missing. And what's particularly frustrating on the user fee thing is, had they said, going into this session, we're going to be looking at user fees, we don't like them, so be prepared to come and share your ideas about other ways you can raise revenues to offset the loss for user fees, I would have gladly joined that discussion because I don't think any of us on city council liked the user fee either, except for the fact that it was the only choice it was the only viable option to get what we wanted to get done.
Yeah, and I think, Mayor, you've been on calls with other mayors who are in a similar position that you're in with user fees. And I'm glad you mentioned and we were talking about the people looking to live here, but when we are massively in cities, and that's been the thing that sales tax, user fees, having those revenue streams has allowed cities to make strategic investments in infrastructure and other items, and in some cases without specifically placing all of the burden just on that resident in their community. But people aren't moving, aren't wanting to move into Wheeling, and that every time it rains, their house floods because of stormwater. I mean, talk about an unfunded mandate and a problem that's there in communities is stormwater infrastructure that in most cases was built years ago. And I mean years before I was even born. This infrastructure was laid, and there's been no funding for it. There's no federal grant dollars for that. So you've got communities that are working to try to make those improvements to that infrastructure. I know and I mention that because I know it's an issue you all deal with up there. And you're not a unique community in that respect, in terms of the fact that in some areas of some cities, when it rains, you might as well just get prepared that the basement's flooding.
All right, Travis. Well, we hear the music coming on, so that means the show is winding down. We appreciate you calling in. We'll definitely have to have you on again sometime.
Yeah.
Hey, thank you so much, Travis. We appreciate it. Hey, we'll see you next week on The Watchdog.